it's time for us to have a bit of a talk again. I'd like to go over a game that is really popular that I did not care for. And I just want to say right now, before we go any further, that warning at the beginning of the video, that applies doubly for this one. So, just think of yourself, a recent game, an action game, a fantasy game, a recent action fantasy game that was released that's very popular that everybody pretty much likes. If you like a game like that, and you don't like the thought of somebody criticizing the game, then I would like to invite you to watch one of my other videos instead. Book of Mario is supposed to be done pretty soon. Maybe a bit of Rabby Ribby. Or maybe we can go real classical and go to the Lobotomy Corporation playthrough. Anything is fine. This is something I feel I need to talk about for a couple of reasons I will get into. So, if you can listen to somebody who may talk bad things about your game, and you can go, well, you know, that's one guy's opinion, and not everybody needs to have the same opinion I do, then by all means we can continue this conversation. Otherwise, I heavily recommend watching something else. Doesn't even have to be me. Alright? So, let's just drop this bombshell real quick. I don't care for Final Fantasy 16. Let me preface it first. I haven't beaten the game. I probably haven't even gotten that far into it. It had a good start. It had a really good start. It gripped me into the world, and the gameplay is enjoyable. Although, to be absolutely honest, for an RPG series, I would have preferred a basic turn-based RPG. But Square Enix is Square Enix. What are you gonna fucking do? Now, the reasons, if you can't guess from the title of the video, is very simple. The tone is so dark, I can't see a light to go after. I cannot think of a single important character that I actually like in this game, which is one of the worst things you can do. I'd actually like to bring up Phantom Brave, which some people also have kind of the same problem with, but I'd like to go over why Phantom Brave does this better story-wise. So I just want to put it in a very simple comparison. We'll take a couple of things as to what I feel don't work in Final Fantasy XVI that does in Phantom Brave, even though it has a couple of similar premises. So the first thing is, for both games, the story can get pretty dark. Now, that doesn't mean that the story is unenjoyable, of course. Honestly, I feel like Phantom Brave's story is one of the greatest out there. But for both of these games, if everybody is so awful that they couldn't bring themselves to continue with the game, I could kind of understand that. Phantom Brave, I feel, is like the closest you can get to having awful characters who treat the main character like garbage and still have a good story. Any darker than that, and I just don't care. Now, the reason that I find it acceptable in Phantom Brave is that the reason that they don't like the main character, Marona, is reasonable. If you've never met Marona, then the only thing that you really know about her is that she lives on an island all alone with a bunch of dead people, and she's some sort of weird necromancer thing. Necromancers in fiction are generally not considered good people. And, you know, just the thought of dealing with corpses in any way that isn't, you know, putting them to rest, kinda creepy. I mean, hell, let's make a whole new character. Frank the Friendly Skeleton. Frank the Friendly Skeleton just wants a friend. But everybody sees him and points at him and screams and runs away. And this makes Frank sad. Final Fantasy 16 doesn't seem to have a good reason. Like, everybody is looking at these people who can use magic and make their lives better, and they're going, oh, we should suppress them. We should make them regret living. Maybe even kill them once in a while. It's... why? If I knew somebody who knew magic, I'd probably do everything I could to get on their good side. If I did, I'd probably even be dishonest about myself to them, just so they could like me. just so I could see if I could get them to do things for me. I'm not gonna pretend I'm a perfect person. But that's not the discussion for today. Simply put, it doesn't make sense to me why these people who, let's be honest, could probably kill anybody who talks down to them 5 times before they hit the ground are being suppressed for any reason other than the entire collective of them don't have a spine, including our main character. These people are just treating their slave people like shit? You shouldn't do that. Nuh-uh. That's a bad. And you shouldn't do a bad. You should treat the people that you have better. Because treating people poorly is a bad, and that's naughty. Fucking kill the bastards! It's not like they look at these people with anything other than genocidal contempt. There's a point when you have to do something. Which actually segues quite well into the next point. The characters who are generally good people should have a relatively reasonable chance to be able to change the people around them. In order to accomplish this, they need to have some sort of foundation for support. Again, Phantom Brave accomplishes this in a couple of different ways. It's like where you're introduced to Marona, who isn't paid properly for doing the work that she's explicitly hired to do. Isn't paid at all because somebody decided to take her money from her. A couple of bad things in general. But you know what else Phantom Brave does relatively quickly? They introduce somebody who's not like those people. They introduce somebody who can't even leave their bed, who doesn't know of the outside world, and doesn't know Marona or her shitty reputation. So when this genuinely nice little girl comes in, they become friends. And this slowly starts to snowball into a big thing, where eventually it becomes believable that Marona can change the minds of everybody. 16 doesn't do this. 16 seems to want to go out of their way to convince you absolutely everybody is either an asshole who would make Snidely Whiplash tell them to tone it down a bit, you're going kind of overboard, or they're just people who can't or refuses to do a thing. Oh yeah, there's that one guy who's leading a big revolution, but he's not one of the people, so it's just kind of implying that these people have so little of a spine that they need somebody who's not them to reach down and pretend to give a shit about them. And again, Clive isn't really much better. It's like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot the original place that he came from is apparently the Good Kingdom because they treat their slaves better. Whoop-de-fucking-do. But I feel like finally the world needs to be believable, which again I guess goes into the first point, but just trust me on this. You want to know the straw that broke the camel's back for me for Final Fantasy 16? It was when this father, who of course treated me with absolute contempt because how dare I be a branded, told me that his son went out into the woods and that there's like a wolf out there and it might kill him and, you gotta get my son back, you piece of shit. Why should I care about you or your child, man? Well, maybe your child, I guess. But, then Clive makes the offhand comment, oh, well, he didn't seem to be that worried. And I knew where this was going. I knew where this was going because I paid attention. And wow, what do you know? The dog is the fucking pet. The boy was never in any real danger. But you know what? It still took me by surprise when the child asked me why didn't I just fucking die. It's like, no real hyperbole, not any sort of exaggeration. The child wants you dead. Not even the awful, awful people who had understandable reason to hate Marona had their children. It's like this much of a fucking Snidely Whiplash. Holy God! I'm sorry, it upsets me. It upsets me greatly. The very first chapter in Phantom Brave ends with the child coming up to Marona, who seems to want to be friends. And it's not the child that makes Marona cry. It's the child's mother who comes up and picks them up like they were about to have their head bitten off. And again, that's believable because they have genuine, decent reason to not like the main character. And that's the big thing. The reason has to make sense. The reason has to make sense as to why the underdog of all underdogs is hated by everybody. It doesn't make a lot of sense in Final Fantasy XVI unless I just assume everyone is a snidely whiplash motherfucker. And Clyde doesn't have a spine. He seems to have more of one than everyone else, but he still doesn't have one. And you know what? That thing with the child, and he wasn't in danger, and you know, these guys said, oh, well, we're gonna get a bigger and stronger dog that'll be able to kill these people. They just straight up say this, and Clytus go, no, you shouldn't do that. That's a bad, and that's wrong. In fact, I'd say that that's so bad and wrong that it would be a whole new word. Maybe bad wrong, or badong. And you know what happens after that? Some random guy manages to get it so that this new dog that they get kills the both of them. Who's this guy? Who's this guy that managed to make this happen? I want to play as that guy. Do they appear at all in the story? Probably not! And every time I bring up my complaints, and this is why I started off saying, if you can't handle the criticism, then move on. Every time I bring it up, they tell me, well, the game gets better after like 20 hours. So I have to deal with these people for 20 hours before it gets good at all? I have a job, mate. I have work to do. I don't have the time to sink into something that may get good in 20 hours. I don't know, man. Maybe they're right. Maybe it does get good in 20 hours. But I'm not gonna find out. I can't be bothered to. Because this game has made me say the 8 deadly words that no fiction should ever cause their audience to say, lest it be doomed to failure. Say it with me, everybody. I don't care what happens to these people. The entire world that Final Fantasy XVI is set in could be set on fire, and everybody could die a slow, painful, agonizing death. And that could be how the game ends. I wouldn't care. Certainly wouldn't lose any fucking sleep over it, because there's nobody here that I like. There's nobody here that I believe can change this awful, awful world for the better. And I don't want to say this. I don't want to say that the game is bad, because, frankly, it's not. The gameplay's awesome. Contrary to what I just said, the gameplay is fun. I enjoy Devil May Crying my way across the stage. And you know what? The battles being big and so over the fucking top, they wouldn't be out of place in an anime? It's great! But eventually those battles stop, and then I have to go out and I have to talk to somebody, and they have to remind me that I'm a dumb piece of shit who should be happy that he's even alive, and that I should consider myself lucky that I'm not being sent on a suicide mission right now, which, spoiler alert, I definitely am, and I can only tolerate that shit for so long.